Welcome to another exciting episode of the Business of Digital podcast, featuring your hosts, Matt Siltala and Dave Rohr. Hey guys, Matt Siltala here alongside my co-host Dave Rohr. Hey Dave, how's it going?
It is going super duper.
All right, well, we got a special treat for you guys. As our listeners know, we do not have guests that often, but when we do, they are of star caliber, I promise you. How do you like that setup, Andy?
I'm thrilled.
We have Andy Beal in the house with us, online reputation master. How you doing, Andy?
I am doing good, and I appreciate that kind introduction. Online reputation master. Never been called that before, but I'll definitely take it. Thank you. I'll send you the check in the mail.
All right. Well, you know, it's kind of it's funny. I don't have many books that are on my desk right in front of me, and one of the books that I do have in front of me is one of the ones that you had sent me on the reputation management. And so, anyway, just let's get this out of the way, just really quick for any of our listeners. Andy has been doing, talking about reputation and educating people about reputation, the online reputation management, for as long as I've known him and beyond that. And so if you go to andybill.com, you'll learn all there is to know about Andy, and that's where you can learn about hiring him, getting him to speak at conferences, all that good stuff. And so again, Andy, I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us about some online reputation stuff this morning. So again, welcome.
Well, thank you, and I'm flattered that you guys would invite me onto this amazing podcast. I know you have a huge audience, so you've set the bar very high for me. I hope I can deliver and give you guys and your audience what will benefit them.
All right, I bet you will. So, I guess let's just jump into it, because Dave and I, as conversations go with other stuff, like you could always be led into just different online reputation problems and things like that, and so we've chatted about it before, but we've really never had an in-depth conversation about online reputation with someone that does that solely for a living. And so I'm excited to get in and chat with you about it. But interesting enough, Andy, and you could share your thoughts about this or in general, but before we jump into the actual core of what we're going to do. But this morning, I read this news article about Burger King in New Zealand, and they're introducing this Vietnamese sandwich, or this burger or whatever, and the commercial had where they had these giant chopsticks and they were trying to feed them to each other, and I guess it got like massive backlash, and there was this one tweeter or this one person on Twitter that had tweeted it out and was basically talking about how offensive it was, and it just like got millions of, anyway, so much negative press that Burger King ended up taking it down and stuff like that. I don't know if you've seen this one that I'm talking about specifically, but how does one, I don't know what the right word is, like how does one overcome something like that, or how does one know, is this going to be offensive, or like who even lets people do stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, that could even be something where maybe in their neck of the woods down there, they didn't think it to be culturally insensitive, and then they forgot that social media is global, and so the uproar comes from audiences that are going to be more offended by that. And I think that it amazes me how companies can have all these billions of dollars, or at least millions of dollars they spend on market research or marketing, yet they come up with these campaigns and they didn't think ahead of like, okay, what's the worst that could happen here? What could be the backlash? What could, who could be offended by this? I mean, you see a lot of, every single day there's a story that comes out where you kind of almost want to slap, just face palm
Yes.
And just like, what in the world? How did they not see that would be offensive to everybody? And unless your brand is in the space where being edgy and offending half your audience is part of who you are, and you accept that you're going to get that backlash as part of who you are, then you really have to consider, who you're going to upset, and then you just kind of stay away from those, because you're just it's gonna hurt you. People that are offended are gonna make the most noise, right? And so that's what we see in any kind of reputation issues is negative reviews or negative blog posts or anything negative that shows up. People that are happy, they got what they expected. They're not necessarily going to go out and write a beautiful blog post or give you a 5-star review because you gave them what they paid for, or what they expected. And so it's always the people that are upset that make the loudest noise, and that's what you got to prepare for. And I think the silver lining is how quickly you respond and you've got to be sincere. You've got to be transparent. Like, so what, how did this even happen? What got us to here? And then you've got to be, quick with your actions to show that they pulled the plug and they're changing everything. And then the key thing is, like, just make sure this is an isolated incident, because if they keep making this mistake, then it's just going to hurt their brand ongoing.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And that's something that Dave and I have talked about a lot. Instead of like getting offended when you get that, if you're hearing a certain type of feedback, whether and again, the discussion that we're going to have is going to lead us to, responding to people on Yelp, Facebook, Twitter, and things like that. But in response to what you were just saying, what Dave and I have talked about a lot is using that feedback instead of being all critical about it and being offended, but using it as using it for the constructive side of it that it is, and do better, and using it for training opportunities. Take that feedback and train the wait staff, or train the people that are servicing, or whoever it might be. But instead of because we all want to get offended so easily, but instead of thinking about it or having that approach, have the approach of, let me take this information and use it for training purposes.
Absolutely. And, there are many scenarios that we cannot predict that someone will be upset, right? So, they're always going to be the new product, the new marketing campaign where we just did not predict the backlash that we would get from this. And so you can't just kind of like sanitize everything you do. You're just not going to be prepared for every single complaint or social media backlash. But the key thing is, like you said, is how do you then respond when you realize you've screwed up and that this is going to hurt you? And so having a sincere, transparent response, not the we apologize if this has offended you in some way, or kind of like you just go through some kind of like benign stock kind of apology. You've got to kind of like get it from the top, somebody that's high up in the company, explain what your intentions were, what you were trying to do, explain where you screwed up, how did you make this mistake, right? And then demonstrate that, like, no, this is not who we are. We are not in the business of offending, our audience. This is something that we were just caught off guard, and we are changing this right now. And then, go the next step and like demonstrate that now you're not just paying lip service. Do something that actually swings the pendulum the other way. So, now do something that shows that you are plugged into different cultures and to, and that you really care about them, or you're plugged into different, a different social stance that is counter to what you just published, and that you're kind of not just the person that's going to stick behind something and just and then just stay with it. That you're hey, we've offended this group. We are now going to sit down with this group. We're going to learn, how did we offend them? We're going to learn how can we be better in the future, and we're going to learn what do they want from us as a company, so that we're appealing to everybody.
And I think with what you said, because I recently I thought about a specific case in our industry, and I don't really want to go into it, but one of the things that I got to thinking about when you're talking about all that is just also understanding that no matter what you do, some people you're just never going to make happy. You're not going to make them happy with the apology. You're not going to make them happy with the retribution or what you did to make it better. Some people just are never going to be happy, and you have to be okay with that, and you have to be able to move on. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, you've got to look at this in terms of your character. So this starts with your personal character as maybe the CEO or the founder of the company, but then you got to look at the character of the company too, right? And so if your character is in line with the messaging that you've put out that has offended somebody else, you've got to take a stand and say, no, this is what we believe. This is who we are as a company. We're sorry that there are people that are upset, but we're not changing our core beliefs. in order to appeal to a 2% of the audience that is offended by this, but is making 90% of the noise. So yeah, I'm not of the belief that, well, let me backtrack. I personally, I always try to be nice to everybody, right? I don't always agree with everybody. I see so much politics and social hashtag campaigns and whatever that I do not agree with. But you know what? I respect someone's right to believe that. I respect that everybody is different, and I respect that everybody wants to not only live their life differently, but they want to use the internet differently. They want to use social media differently. And if that's the way that they choose to use it, that's fine. But you know what? Then you've got to respect their right and my right to say, I'm not doing business with you anymore. I'm never going to your site again. I'm not reading your newspaper again. But it's like, if you don't like what they're doing, don't surround yourself with them. Don't be with them. But if they're not, unless they're doing something really heinous, then just kind of accept that they've got the right to do that. That's part of their brand. That's part of who they are. And then they've got to realize that, hey, you live the character of your company, but if that treads on toes, and it treads on a lot of toes, you got to be prepared for the backlash that you might receive from that. But then sometimes also, like we talk about, like it's all fleeting, right? So you sometimes you just need to wait until the next controversy comes along and takes the spotlight off of you and points it onto them, and then you can take a sigh of relief and go, okay, there's a new Twitter moment up now, and that company's going to get attacked. I can kind of rest a little easier. So yeah, sometimes it's transient.
It's so funny that that's actually like true.
Right.
Anyway. All right. So I guess like getting into some specifics, I think, because a lot of our listeners tend to be smaller businesses. You know, a lot of them are on Yelp. A lot of them survive with like reviews, whether it be on Facebook or Yelp, for example. I guess Google to an extent, but my question would be on how do you deal, like, I'm sure you've come across the types like on Yelp where, you know, the owner gets in and tries to respond to every little harsh criticism, and then they get to defending, and pretty soon they're starting to look like a psycho and stuff. So, you know, what would be your recommendation to the people that are listening that, you know, are on Yelp and are trying to figure out how to do Yelp better, how to respond to those? You know, obviously they want to put their brand, you know, their best brand forward, and that's why they're responding, but they don't realize sometimes how they're coming across or how they look. So maybe get into the how-tos or what to do exactly for those type of people in those situations with reviews and whatnot on places like Yelp, Facebook, and Google.
So that's a good question. So first place to start is to realize that Yelp, Google, wherever it may be, that is not who you are. That is a reflection of who you are. So it's a reflection of how you treated your customer. And a lot of people, especially if they've got complaints, they'll head to Yelp or they'll leave an online review somewhere, TripAdvisor, Google reviews, wherever it may be, because they just didn't feel like they got what they needed from you in person or as part of the transaction or as part of a follow-up. So first of all, go back even further and like, okay, how do we do a better job? And then also, like, how do we collect responses? How do I make sure that someone's unhappy, that they reach out to us before they leave the premises or before they head to Yelp and make a complaint? Usually they go there because they felt like they just couldn't get the resolution they were looking for. They sent a tweet that you didn't respond to, or they asked to speak to the manager and the manager wasn't there, and the person wouldn't give the cell phone number of the manager. And, you know, it kind of like just puts gasoline on a small spark that you could have extinguished. And so when they go online, just realize that they're using a channel that they hope is going to amplify their voice. But that is not necessarily your product line. That's not your channel. So you do need to be respectful. And again, you need to show engagement. You need to show that you care. But don't get into a back and forth. No matter what the platform, they have their say. Then you go in and you respond, and I'll come back to some ideas of how to respond. But then you offer to take it offline. You give them a cell phone number. You give them your email address. You want to take it offline because you're on a platform that you have no control over. I mean, sometimes you can respond back and forth. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes they can edit and update their review, but you can't edit and update your reply. So it's a lot of stuff out of your control. But by taking it offline, you take it back to where this all started, whether that's, hey, come into my store so I can talk to you, or please call this number, or I'd like to email you, whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, you got to realize that, yeah, they've gone online because it got out of hand and they didn't get what they needed. And you don't want this to kind of then to continue and fester online. And you also, by doing so, you also show to anybody else that comes on. So anybody else that comes along and happens to see that review, if they see, wow, look, that person wasn't happy, but that manager really cared. And that manager gave his cell phone number. And that manager said that they want to do right so that the person's happy again. So at least I know if I get less than 100%, I'm going to get some resolution here.
I like that a lot. Hey, Dave, I apologize because, Andy and I are
Dave's still here?
Yeah, Dave, are you?
Okay.
I have the recording on, so yes.
Feel free to jump in. Yeah, do you have any questions or any comments on that?
Well, I was going to say, I think especially on Yelp, I think most of the examples that we always see, whether we're in digital marketer mode or, travel mode, like Matt and I always, frequently have lunch at different places, and I'll look at a lot of Yelp reviews, and you guys actually have traveled a lot more to farther places together. And I'm sure Andy and your wife, when you guys have been doing your research to not let Matt down in your quest to always get some really good food and to see some spots, you probably see some Yelp reviews or TripAdvisor reviews. I think
for the record, they've never let me down.
I highly doubt it. I think one of the biggest things you see, though, is if you don't have a plan and you don't have that system of we're going to try to take it offline, it becomes emotional. It's this taco truck is my baby. This business is my baby. You're attacking my baby.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it does become that. You always assume, and this is something I tell people, always assume the person that's complaining is having the worst day of their life. So don't always think that you have to go roaring in there and defend yourself. Assume that they're having the worst day of their life, and even if they've gone over the top, I mean, there may be other circumstances that go on, but act in a way that oh my gosh, this person, they lost their child 2 days ago, and here I came in mean. So that's a good mindset of always assuming they're having the worst day of their life. That kind of sets you up. But you kind of you don't want to go in and be all this defensive, because that is the knee-jerk reaction. So sometimes what I recommend is draft up your response, but then step away and have lunch, or call your good friend that's in a different city but the same industry and say, hey, this is what the complaint I've had, and this is what I'm thinking of in terms of reply, and what are your thoughts on that? Sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I know that I have typed out a tweet or a Facebook status update many a time, and then I've sat there and looked at it for 2 minutes and then just completely deleted it, and I've kind of felt kind of good that, hey, I didn't actually put that online, but it was somewhat cathartic to type it out.
I've never done that once or twice a day.
Exactly, right? So yeah, you don't want to get into that argument with them, even if you feel you're in the right. Now, that doesn't mean you get all sheepish and you kind of hand a victory over to them even when they're completely wrong. But you do want to show some kind of you want to be clear-headed and you want to have a clear conscience too. So there are a number of different things that you can do. So for example, even just taking a break and okay, hey John, go in and take a look at the customer records. Do we actually was this person actually a customer? They said they came in on Saturday around 2:00 and da da da. So check to see if they're an actual customer, because it could just be a competitor, just kind of put in a fake review up. It could be something where there was a misunderstanding. They thought that they were going to get something shipped to them the next day, but your website clearly said that you're having a delay of 7 days due to a shortage, and even in the email you sent out. So you want to kind of just be calm and collect all the facts, not because you want to kind of rub it in their face, but you just want to go in again and say, okay, I've got, we feel pretty good about this. But even if they are attacking you, and it's your kid, right? And you hear the joke that it's a face only a parent could love. So even if you've got an ugly baby for a company and you really love it, but it's going downhill, then you've still got to kind of look at it from their perspective. And then at some point you got to look at this and say, wow, we keep getting negative reviews just like this. Oh, I'm so mad. This is my baby. I put so many hours in this, and every day I see a negative review come up, and they keep attacking, and I just hate it. And it's like, well, okay, so what's wrong with your company? What's wrong with your product if you keep seeing these negative reviews coming up a lot? Because there's probably something there that you need to actually change, even though it is your baby and you love it. There's something that you've got to change here.
And I like that, and that's what I was talking about earlier. That Dave and I have tried to help people, in any of the small little conversations of ORM that we've had on this. We've talked about using that as training purposes and actually carve out some time. Again, whether you're a one person team or you have 50 people on a team that are doing something, but take that feedback and do some training with it. Like turn the negative into a positive. I like that. Excuse me. It does also with something that you said, Andy, got me thinking about, in situations that I have with with products that I've sold online and some of the businesses that I've had. It's funny. One of the businesses is selling mattresses, and I can't tell you how many times would get calls up and people would start yelling about how, we ruined their mattress and they're going to leave us a horrible review if we don't get this taken care of. And they're so angry at our company. And then we just calmly sit there and talk with them and help them understand, okay, well, yeah, I understand you're mad and you're upset, but let's figure out who actually ruined this. Okay, it was delivered this way, so it was FedEx or UPS or whatever carrier. So that's who you're actually mad at. You're mad at them for doing this, and it has nothing to do with our company. But basically, you walk them through this whole process where by the time that they're done talking to you, they're not mad at your company anymore. They're mad at FedEx or whoever actually did the problem. But you help them, you in a sense, you help them not walk off that cliff by going and writing a negative review about your company when it had nothing to do with your company specific, their problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that you also, you just kind of need to look at the bigger picture of in terms of how you help them. We all, everybody knows about the lifetime value of a customer, right? So that gets thrown around a lot in the marketing world. But there's the lifetime cost of a detractor. So a lot of companies don't take into account what it's going to cost them to fix this. So if you've got a bricks and mortar store, you're familiar with the whole concept of shrinkage, right? And you factor that into your profit margin, that you're going to have some shoplifters or employees that are going to take some of the stock. And you factor that in when you work out your profit margins. Well, companies need to start factoring in, the cost of making a reputation issue right. So, set aside that okay, well, if this person's not happy, if we don't make this right, I'm going to lose their business. And then they threaten that they're going to leave a Yelp review and write a negative blog post. How many more potential customers am I going to lose? So that's all that, sum of lifetime value customers that I'm going to lose. People don't take that into account when the person just wants you to refund the Prime shipping that they had, or give them a gift card because they didn't like the food that you served that particular time. The knee-jerk reaction is, no, that's way too much of a cost. But studies have shown that when you make an unhappy customer happy again, they tell far more many people than when they were unhappy, or even if they just were happy. Think about the number of times where you've gone out to a restaurant and the managers come over and said, "Hey, we're sorry that your food is a little bit late," and you didn't even complain, but that manager was proactive and said, "Yep, the dessert is on us." That's happened to me a few times, and I tell people, "Oh, you should go there. Our food, we didn't even complain, but because our food was a little bit late, the manager came out, gave us a free dessert." That's a really good place to go. So you got to start factoring in all of this stuff when you're on the phone or on email and you're dealing with an unhappy customer. As Matt was saying, if you have to be the one that calls FedEx to get a resolution, take the time to do that, because you don't want to lose this customer and you don't want to lose potential customers.
Very good. All right. I guess, Andy, if you wouldn't mind just kind of wrapping things up, because we're getting close to the end here, maybe share with us just 2 to 3 tips on, walking that very fine line of getting someone off, getting that person that's really mad about to leave you that scathing review online, to getting them offline, but also going through that whole process, giving empathy, and maybe, share your top 2 to 3 tips on that. And I think we can call it good.
All right. So if you see a negative review online, then a little kind of workflow that it often works well, and every negative review is subjective, so they're all different, but basically show appreciation for them, bring it to your attention, that, you know, show that you're a company that cares that you've let a customer down. So thank them for letting them know, for writing the review and letting them know that you failed them. That sends a really good signal. Highlight any positives that they did have in the review, because you want to kind of show that, hey, it wasn't all that bad. You know, here's something. We're glad that you liked the, you know, the steak that you had, or glad that the flowers cheered up your mother that you gave them to. And then highlight what went wrong. We're sorry that they were delivered late. We're sorry that you didn't like the dessert that we brought you. And kind of indicate how you're going to make that right. That's not something that a customer normally gets from you. So you want to make that right. And then take it offline. So you want to say, look, come into the store, give us a call, or here's my personal email address, whatever you want to choose. I want to learn more about this so that we can ensure that you're happy. I want to get you back to a 5-star rating, and I want to hear from you how we can possibly do that for you. Not only does that diffuse it, get them offline, hopefully turn that customer into a happy customer that maybe will then, without your prompting, because you don't want to be the kind of guy that just makes it conditional, but you do something right for them and they just turn around and say, okay, I'm going to change my review to 5 stars. So maybe it'll give you that opportunity. But also it sends a signal to everybody else that's looking at that review that you're not a company that just ignores negative reviews. You're not a company that thinks it's okay that you only got 1 star. You're a company that cares about their customers. You're a company that cares about the service or products that you provide, and that if anybody else is worried about having the same experience, they don't need to, because you're going to make it right.
I love that. I love that. Perfect ending. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you guys for having me on your show. It's always fun to talk about my favorite topic.
All right. Well, I do appreciate it. And again, for anybody that wants more information on Andy, go to andybill.com. And luckily, he doesn't have one of those hard last names like mine or Dave's. And so we can actually send them to andybill.com, and they're probably going to get there. But for Dave and Andy, I'm Matt Siltala, and we thank you guys for joining us, and we will check back with you on the next one, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.